Good morning, respected Professor Swaminathan, Dr. Vijayalakshmi Saxena, Professor Narayan Rao, other scientists and students. After such a comprehensive talk by Professor Swaminathan, there is very little that anybody can add on the topic of food and nutrition security. However, let me try and fill up maybe some details on the status of food security in India, as well as try and talk a little bit about what we at the MSSRF do to enhance the household food security of the people with whom we work. Now, before I proceed to talk about food security, I would like to say a few words on what is food security. Now, this definition that you can see on the slide, which is the currently accepted definition given by the Food and Agricultural Organization, is something which has evolved over 5 decades or more than 5 decades. To begin with, when we said food security, the idea was food availability, the food adequacy or the food availability and food production at the global or regional or national level was seen to, was the understanding of food security. Over the years, academicians have discussed this concept, and it has been understood that it is not enough to talk only about the stock or what is available in a macro sense, but it is important for people to have the purchasing power to acquire the food that is needed for them. So with this, the idea that food security means access to food, the purchasing power of food also became important. So this was slowly brought into the understanding of what is food security. Then it was seen that you may have food available and you may have the purchasing power to access food, but if you do not have clean environment and if you do not have safe drinking water, then what a person consumes will not be absorbed in his body. So with this, the concept of food absorption or utilization became important. So we have slowly today come to an understanding that when we say food security, it is not just food availability, but it is much broader than food availability. It includes food access, stability and sustainability and utilization of food. So it is with this understanding the FAO has come up with this definition that you can see on the screen of food security. Now this food security, in this definition, there is a discussion, there is a statement on nutritious food. So this food security, in fact, within it, takes into account the nutrition security also, but it's not quite well elucidated, and therefore it becomes necessary for us to define what is nutrition security, and that has been defined by our Professor Swaminathan as nutrition security is physical, economic and social access to a balanced diet, safe drinking water, environmental hygiene, primary health care and primary education. So food security is a necessary condition for nutrition security, but that is not a sufficient condition. So it has become clear that we have to incorporate the nutritional concerns into the food security framework, because ultimately our goal is the nutritional outcome. Now, I'm going to quickly go through these slides as these have been clearly, Professor Swaminathan discussed all of this in his presentation. Before we come to where we are, he did talk about the ship-to-mouth existence that we had after the 5 decades. I mean, if you look at the status of food security in early 1950s, soon after our independence, the very low rate of growth of agriculture during the colonial era left us with nothing but 150 kilogram per capita availability of food in the 1950s. And this slowly increased, and we overcame the crisis of the ship-to-mouth existence through significant technological interventions in all the food-producing sectors. And these technological interventions, there was some catalytic technology in each one of the important food production sector. And all of this was essentially achieved through the state public research system. If you take the crop husbandry program, as was pointed out by Professor in his earlier presentation, the varietal improvement program, the high-yielding varieties of especially rice and wheat, was very important for us to improve our food production. And if you take the fish production in the freshwater aquaculture, it was the introduction of carp culture which brought about increase in fish production. In the dairy sector, it was the artificial insemination, and in the poultry sector, it was the introduction of high-yielding layers, and in the small ruminant sector, it was the intensive health cover program. Now, there has always been a package approach. Like he pointed out, there was investment on irrigation, there was investment on fertilizer production, there was priority sector lending on credit. So there has been, and there was a marketing which had a very important contribution to especially the dairy sector development. But nevertheless, there has been, the key to the production has been a catalytic technology in each of these fields, essentially funded by the public research system. So what has been the net result of all of this? If you take only the food grain production, you find that there has been a 5-fold increase over the last 6.5 decades, from 1951-52 to the latest year for which data is available, to 2013 to 14. But what is of concern to us is, when you look at the last 5 decades, when you look at the annual compound growth rate of the population and the food grain production, you find for the first time since post-independence, in the post-independence period, for the first time in the 1990s, the rate of growth of food production was lower than the rate of growth of the population. Now, this has important implication for the per capita availability of food grains. And that is exactly what we see when we look at this graph on per capita net availability of cereals. It increases till about 91, and then there is a decline, but thankfully from mid-2000 onwards, there is an upward trend in per capita net availability of cereals. Now, food grains is made up of cereals plus pulses, and if you look at the pulses, there is a declining trend over the last 5 decades. But if you again, from mid-2000s onwards, thanks to the Pulse Mission and the National Food Security Mission, etc., that there have been positive investment in the rural sector, in the agricultural sector, and that the results are quite visible in terms of a reversal of the declining trend since mid-2000s. It was pointed out in the earlier presentation that we are the largest, the milk production is the highest in India, and there has been a phenomenal growth of milk production over the decades. And the per capita availability of milk has also shown a consistent increase. And if you look at the egg production again, these are the number of eggs that are available for consumption has increased many-fold over the last 6 decades in our country. And the growth in egg production has consistently been higher than the growth of population, resulting in an increasing trend in the per capita availability of egg. So is the case in terms of fish production. While the absolute production, when we look at the country as a whole, has shown a remarkable increase in all the major sectors of food, what has it meant for the people who are living in our country? What is available in the country as a whole does not say much about the distribution, or the per capita availability is only an average figure and does not necessarily say that an average person has access to that available food grain or available food. As a result of the problems in distribution of food, India today is ranked 97th out of 118 countries. When the Global Hunger Index was calculated by the IFPRI, India ranks 97th out of 118. And how does IFPRI calculate the Global Hunger Index? It takes into account some basic indicators such as the percentage of population that are undernourished and percentage of children who suffer from wasting and children who suffer from stunting and children who suffer before the age of 5. So these are basically the indicators that are taken into account, and that is how there are many other countries who fare much better than India on this. These figures again were discussed in the earlier presentation, and the earlier Dr. Manmohan Singh said when the nutrition outcome indicator data were released, he said it's quite shameful, the figures. And even today we have about 2/5 of our children who are stunted, who are not able to have their normal level of growth. And more than half the women are anemic in our country. So clearly we have a problem of access to food. While public research system has seen to it that we no longer are dependent on imports except for certain, except for pulses and certain grains, we are no longer dependent on imports for our existence. We have managed, thanks to our research and our investment in the research system, that our production has increased. But the nutrition outcome indicators tell us that we need to do much more in terms of distribution aspects. So it is in this context, it becomes important for us to talk about the National Food Security Act. Now this legislation is extremely important because it has transformed mere provisos under different schemes into legal entitlements. Now, this National Food Security Act is in operation across the entire country, in all the states of the country. And under this act, as per this act, every priority households, every person who's identified as a member of the priority households is entitled to 5 kilograms of cereals. And this can be either rice or wheat or millets, the nutritious cereals. And again, I don't want to dwell on this because this was touched upon in Professor's presentation about the importance of this act for women's empowerment, for inclusion of the gender dimension in the act, and the nutritional support of 6,000 rupees, which was once again announced by the Prime Minister on the eve of the new year. This already finds a place in the National Food Security Act of providing 6,000 rupees for a pregnant woman, a maternity benefit, and a food security allowance wherever cereals cannot be reached. Now, there are, however, while the Act provides a legal entitlement, there is still an issue. There are still a couple of limitations with the National Food Security Act, and the most important one is that we are still with a targeted approach. Now, the magnitude of the malnutrition problem in our country is so huge that we cannot afford to exclude anybody from the entitlements that this act can provide. But we are once again going with a targeted approach of identifying priority households under this act. So this is something which we need to work on to make it as an universal approach. Many examples from within our country, the functioning of the public distribution system in Tamil Nadu has shown that the universal approach will have lesser leakages than a targeted approach and is much more inclusive. And therefore, it's important that we move from a targeted approach towards a universal approach. And another important limitation of the National Food Security Act, notwithstanding the merits of the Act, is that it is basically provides entitlement for basic cereals. So the Act is not moving towards providing nutrition security. There are no entitlement for pulses or oil in this, in the public distribution system that's going to be based on the National Food Security Act. So there is still scope for us to work on improving the public distribution system by incorporating some of these major limitations. So while we have so far seen what as a country we have achieved in the post-independent period in terms of food production and what we have done in terms of reaching the food, making it an entitlement to the priority households in our country, and what we need to do further is to increase our investment to improve our productivity in all the major food sectors. But there is also, given the magnitude of the problem in our country, there is also scope for very many actors in this field. So what is it that a non-governmental organization, which is also a research organization, such as the M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation, can do to enhance the food security of the community with whom they work? So I'm just going to briefly touch upon this. Now, MSSRF was started in the year 1988 with the prize money that Professor Swaminathan received with the World Food Prize Award money, and the vision is to harness science and technology for sustainable and equitable development. We work across 7 states in the southern part of India, and we have 21 field locations. And our mandate is to work to a pro-poor, pro-nature and pro-women approach is what we adopt across in all our activities. Now, the interventions that we do to enhance food security of the households, we can classify them into 3 components. As when I began my presentation, I said the food security comprises of 3 components: food availability, food access, and food absorption. So some of the activities that we do to enhance food availability for the community is in the area of conservation of agrobiodiversity and production of nutri-rich food, including the farming system of nutrition approach, production of vegetables and fruits in nutri-gardens, development of salt-tolerant rice variety, and strengthening livelihoods of farmers or any livelihood that they are engaged in is one way by which you enhance their purchasing power to access food. And setting up community food grain bank, which are managed by the community themselves in remote areas in Koraput region of Orissa, is something which we find has enhanced the food security of the people there. And along with all of this, it's extremely important that we also work towards enhancing the literacy, the nutrition literacy of the people, and to ensure there are various schemes by our central government and state governments for providing safe drinking water and for toilets and for general environment. So by convergence with government departments, we also try to ensure safe drinking water and health and hygiene of the people with whom we work. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit in detail about one program that we are implementing in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra. This program is called the Mahila Kisan Sashaktikaran Pariyojana, which is the program of the empowerment of women farmers. Now, while Professor Swaminathan was the chairman of the National Farmers Commission, he visited Vidarbha and he came across a large number of young widows who were all farmers, but who were not decision makers, who had lost their husbands to the agrarian distress, to farm suicide victims. But, while they were farmers, they were not the ones who would decide on what crop to grow or how to grow. And that set him thinking, and he decided that MSSRF should start working in Vidarbha and work with women farmers. And so we started working with women who were actively engaged in farming. Now, why is it important? Why is it important that we organize women farmers? The photograph that you see in front of you is an advertisement given by a government agency. To everyone, when you say farmer, the face that comes to your mind is that of a male farmer. A man clad in dhoti with a turban is a farmer. So it becomes necessary for us to have a special program to organize the women farmers and to address the specific issues that they may have. So this is what MSSRF attempted to do and we began this program in 2007, and we are happy to say that this program today has become a national program, and it has been taken up by the National Rural Livelihood Mission of the Ministry of Rural Development and is in operation across almost all the states in the country. And in our program, we try to capacitate the farmers as the women as farmers, as homemakers, and as citizens. As citizens, they are given they are motivated to attend the Gram Sabha in the Panchayat and to raise issues that concern them as citizens who are living in that village and what is required for them as farmers. So this is one program of MSSRF, and as I said, we hope that this is a beginning in the social, technological and skill empowerment of women in agriculture, will bring about far-reaching changes and rewrite the role of women in community and society. That is a quote from Professor's writing. And as Professor pointed out in his presentation, while the government has a large number of schemes to improve the food security of its citizens, it's also time that we start thinking on what the farmers can do themselves to improve the food security, because farmers are also the largest producers and consumers of food, and it is in this concept that he has come up with this idea of farming system for nutrition, a sustainable framework of farming that adopts a nutrition sensitive approach to agriculture. And thank you.